Golden Age Hollywood stars with shockingly bad hygiene. For decades, Hollywood sold us perfection, flawless smiles, impeccable hair, a world where everyone looked like they'd just stepped out of a dream. But behind that shimmering curtain of glamour was something no one ever wanted to talk about. The truth is, those legendary stars who defined elegance and beauty often smelled nothing like it. Their faces filled magazine covers, their kisses melted hearts on screen. Yet off camera, many of them were fighting a very different kind of problem. Rotting teeth, weeks without bathing, breath that could clear a film set. The golden age of Hollywood wasn't just about glitz and stardom. It was also about secrets. And some of the worst ones didn't involve affairs or scandals, but soap, or the lack of it. If you're the kind of person who likes their Hollywood stories unfiltered, where the diamonds are fake, the smiles are strained, and the truth stinks just a little, you're in the right place. Go ahead and hit subscribe now, because by the time this video's over, you'll never look at classic glamour the same way again. Let's start with the man who ruled Hollywood and made his co-stars dread every kiss. Clark Gable, the king with killer breath. Clark Gable. To the world, he was the definition of masculine charm, the king of Hollywood himself. That famous grin, that effortless confidence, the way he could melt a room with a single line. But if you ever had to stand close enough to smell his breath, you'd realize the king had a serious problem with his throne. By his early 30s, Gable had already lost nearly all of his natural teeth. Not a few, almost every single one. Years of gum disease had rotted them away, forcing dentists to replace them with full dentures. And those dentures? They didn't just look uncomfortable, they smelled like a nightmare. Co-stars whispered about it on set, but no one dared to confront him. You didn't tell Clark Gable he stank. You just quietly prayed your scene didn't involve kissing. Sophia Loren, who starred opposite him in It Started in Naples, was said to keep her distance whenever the cameras stopped rolling. Even she, with her grace and poise, couldn't handle what people behind the scenes called the Gable air. It wasn't just the dentures. Gable reportedly refused to use mouthwash or breath mints, believing they'd interfere with his acting. Imagine that. The biggest star in Hollywood choosing artistic purity over fresh breath. Crew members described how his breath would linger on set, sharp, sour, unforgettable. But his fame was so massive, nobody said a word. He was too powerful to offend. They called him the king for his charm and charisma, but to those who got too close, it was a reign they were happy to keep their distance from. Joan Crawford, the cosmetic catastrophe. Few stars embodied control and perfection like Joan Crawford. Every outfit was pressed, every hair in place, every inch of her home polished until it shone. But behind that image of discipline was a secret that made even her closest colleagues uneasy. Crawford's obsession with beauty had literally destroyed her mouth. In her quest for sharper cheekbones and a more sculpted face, she underwent a bizarre dental procedure where several back molars were removed. The goal was to create deeper hollows in her cheeks, following a dangerous Hollywood trend at the time. But the aftermath was a disaster. Her teeth began to shift, infections set in, and her upper lip swelled permanently. The very trademark pout that became part of her allure was actually a side effect of chronic pain. Makeup artists who worked with her said it was a contradiction they could never forget. She'd scrub her hands raw, demand spotless mirrors, and insist every prop be perfectly aligned. Yet her breath told another story. Years of dental problems and heavy drinking made it impossible to hide the smell. Crawford's face was her fortune, and she paid dearly to keep it camera-ready. But beneath the rouge and lipstick was a mouth that reminded everyone. Perfection in Hollywood often came with a terrible cost. Marilyn Monroe, the dirty bombshell. Marilyn Monroe, the ultimate fantasy of Hollywood's golden age. On screen, she was pure allure. Flawless skin, platinum curls, that whispery voice that could melt anyone. But away from the flashing cameras, her personal habits told a story far less glamorous. According to multiple accounts from people who worked with her, Marilyn wasn't exactly devoted to cleanliness. She reportedly went days without bathing, avoided deodorant altogether, and almost never wore undergarments. Her co-stars described the contradiction as jarring. A woman who looked like perfection, yet lived with shocking indifference to hygiene. Clark Gable, who worked with her on The Misfits, was famously disgusted. He had a reputation for being obsessively neat, and he found Marilyn's lax habits impossible to ignore. Crew members whispered that Gable kept as much distance as possible between takes. Her longtime makeup artist, Alan Whitey Snyder, developed creative ways to manage the problem, always keeping baby wipes and powder on hand to freshen her up before close-ups. The wardrobe department did the same, quietly replacing costumes when the smell lingered. It's hard to imagine the world's most desired woman being anything less than perfect. But that was the real Monroe, brilliant, fragile, and utterly human. She could hypnotize millions with a smile, even as those standing inches away knew that Hollywood's brightest star sometimes carried a shadow of her own making. Howard Hughes, the germaphobe millionaire. Howard Hughes was the kind of man who seemed untouchable, a billionaire before 30, a genius inventor, a movie producer, and a man who dated every starlet worth knowing. He was tall, handsome, and impossibly wealthy, the picture of control. But that image didn't last. As the years passed, Hughes's brilliance gave way to something darker. His lifelong fear of germs spiraled into a full-blown obsession. What began as meticulous grooming soon turned into a complete rejection of it. He isolated himself in dark hotel rooms, refusing to bathe for months, letting his hair grow wild and his nails curl into claws. At one point, he reportedly wore tissue boxes on his feet as shoes, convinced it protected him from infection. Employees who tried to help found themselves dealing with a man who had descended into chaos. Hughes collected jars of his own urine, avoided human contact, and issued bizarre instructions from behind sealed doors. Yet he still demanded perfection from the women he dated. Flawless skin, immaculate hygiene, and absolute obedience. The contradiction was haunting. A man who wanted to conquer the sky but couldn't stand the touch of another person. Hughes became a ghost of his former self, a millionaire trapped in a fortress of filth. The same obsession that once made him a visionary eventually consumed him, proving that in Hollywood, control can be the most dangerous addiction of all. Judy Garland. When fame broke the body. Judy Garland was Hollywood's darling, the voice that carried us somewhere over the rainbow. But behind those sparkling eyes was a woman trapped in an industry that controlled every breath she took, including when she could eat, sleep, or even rest. And over time, that control came with devastating consequences. From her teenage years at MGM, Judy was fed a toxic mix of pills, stimulants to keep her awake, sedatives to make her sleep, and diet drugs to keep her thin. Her schedule was brutal, her life micromanaged. It's no wonder her body and mind eventually began to collapse. As her dependence on medication deepened, simple self-care became impossible. Friends and co-stars recalled periods where Judy would arrive on set disheveled, her hair unwashed, her breath heavy with alcohol and cigarettes. Assistants were quietly assigned to help her bathe, brush her teeth, and keep her presentable for the camera. On her good days, she glowed, witty, warm, and professional. But on the bad ones, the toll of addiction and depression was impossible to hide. Her hygiene issues weren't vanity or laziness. They were symptoms of exhaustion, of a woman who'd been pushed beyond her limits by the same system that made her famous. Judy's downfall wasn't about dirt or neglect. It was about what happens when a person is treated like a product. Her voice captivated millions, but behind it was someone barely holding herself together. And the shine of Hollywood did nothing to clean that up. James Dean, the rebel who refused to wash. James Dean wasn't just Hollywood's rebel. He was rebellion. Everything about him felt raw, untamed, and effortlessly cool. But that defiance didn't stop at the screen. Off-camera, Dean lived with the same disregard for rules, including the ones involving soap and water. Friends and co-stars described him as magnetic but messy. He'd wear the same jeans and t-shirt for days, sometimes weeks, without washing them. His famous red socks? He considered them lucky charms and reportedly wore them until they were stiff. Bathing was optional, deodorant non-existent. It wasn't that he didn't know better, he just didn't care. On the set of Rebel Without a Cause, director Nicholas Ray had to pull Dean aside more than once after complaints from crew members. Natalie Wood, his co-star, managed to keep her professionalism during their romantic scenes, but those close to the production later admitted she often looked visibly uncomfortable during the closer shots. Dean saw his grime as part of his authenticity, proof that he wasn't just another polished studio product. He believed the dirt, the smell, and the unfiltered edge made him real. And in a way, he was right. That reckless, imperfect humanity became the very thing that turned him into a legend, a star who burned fast, lived hard, and never bothered to clean up the ashes. Montgomery Clift, the broken idol. Montgomery Clift was once the definition of the perfect leading man, soft-spoken, intense, and devastatingly handsome. But one night in 1956 changed everything. After crashing his car outside Elizabeth Taylor's home, Clift's face was shattered. His jaw had to be wired shut. His appearance and his spirit were never the same. The accident left him in constant pain, and with it came a dependency on painkillers and alcohol. As the addiction deepened, his routines disappeared. Co-stars and makeup artists noticed how his hygiene declined. His clothes rumpled, his breath sour, his body unwashed for days. What had once been effortless charm now carried a quiet sadness. Those who loved him tried to help. Elizabeth Taylor, his closest friend, even hired assistants to make sure he bathed and ate properly while filming Suddenly last summer. But Clift was slipping away. Depression and self-loathing took over, and personal care became the least of his worries. By the time he filmed The Misfits, the difference was heartbreaking. The same man who once symbolized Hollywood's beauty now looked like a ghost haunting his own career. His hygiene wasn't just neglect. It was a reflection of someone broken inside, a man who'd lost the will to maintain the illusion of glamour. Marlon Brando, the method stinker. Marlon Brando was a force of nature, the man who rewrote acting itself. He didn't just play characters, he became them. But that same intensity that made him a genius also made him, well, unbearable to stand next to. Brando was famous for refusing to bathe regularly. He skipped deodorant, wore the same clothes for days, and often arrived on set drenched in sweat. His co-stars complained quietly, but who was going to lecture Marlon Brando about smelling bad? During a streetcar named Desire, Vivien Leigh reportedly dreaded their close scenes. That steamy tension everyone saw on screen? Half of it was real discomfort. By the 1970s, the problem had only grown worse. On the set of Apocalypse Now, Francis Ford Coppola and his crew were already struggling with Brando's unpredictable behavior, his weight, his moods, his constant improvising. Adding his overpowering body odor to that chaos made filming almost unbearable. But for Brando, the grime was part of the performance. He rejected Hollywood's polished perfection and believed authenticity meant showing up exactly as he was, flaws, sweat, and all. It was rebellion wrapped in genius. Brando could captivate an audience with a whisper, even as his co-stars quietly prayed for fresh air. He wasn't just acting against the system, he was living against it, proving that in Hollywood, sometimes the line between method acting and madness was as thin as a layer of sweat. Hollywood's golden age glimmered with diamonds and champagne, but behind that shine was something sour. The very people the world worshipped for their beauty and charm were often hiding secrets that no amount of perfume could mask. Clark Gable's dentures, Marilyn Monroe's careless habits, Brando's defiance, Garland's heartbreak. Each one shows that perfection in Hollywood was never real. It was a performance, polished for cameras and sold to millions. The truth is, fame doesn't clean anyone up. It only hides the stains better. Behind every elegant smile and carefully crafted image was a human being, flawed, fragile, and sometimes filthy. So the next time you watch those old black and white classics, remember this. What you see on screen was only half the story. The other half didn't smell nearly as sweet. If you want the stories the studios tried to bury, the scandals, the secrets, and the sides of fame that never made the headlines, stay right here. The next secret we uncover might be even dirtier.